The Vigilante's origins date back to 1953, when North American's Columbus Division, led by Frank Compton, began working on a project known as the North American General Purpose Attack Weapon. This project was an extension of the company's research into low-altitude weapons delivery techniques, and was meant to replace the A.J. Savage and A-3D Sky Warrior. The initial proposal was for a small, single-seat, transonic nuclear-capable attack bomber designed for low-altitude missions. North American would deliver this proposal to the Bureau of Aeronautics in January 1945. The Bureau, however, had different ideas for the project, and requested the aircraft to be adapted for Mach 2 plus high-altitude missions. Other requirements included the ability to perform a carrier takeoff in a no-winds condition while carrying a full complement of fuel and weapons. North American's new proposal was to be a mixed propulsion aircraft, capable of reaching Mach 1.6 at 50,000 feet, where it would then activate a rocket motor, propelling the aircraft to 70,000 feet at Mach 2. Of course, the new speed requirements also required an extensive redesign of the airframe itself, causing the revised proposal to grow significantly in overall size and weight. This new proposal, designated NA-233, was submitted in April 1955. In February the following year, after a series of preliminary wind tunnel tests, North American was given permission to complete a full-size mock-up to be reviewed in March. The mock-up would exhibit a number of design changes from the original proposal. These changes included a single vertical fin in contrast to the proposed dual stabilizers, redesigned engine intakes, and an expendable tail cone to replace the original clamshell design. It would also be designed to seat a crew of two, a pilot and navigator. By June, a letter of intent was signed, promising $86 million for the development of two static airframes of what was then designated YA-3J. The first of these airframes would roll out on the 16th of May, 1958. Ground testing and high-speed taxi runs would be conducted over the next 3 months in preparation for the aircraft's first flight. Finally, at the hands of Chief Test Pilot Dick Wenzel, the YA-3J prototype performed its maiden flight on the 31st of August. The flight went smoothly and achieved a speed of Mach 0.92 at an altitude of 35,000 feet during its hour-long maiden flight. The A-3J was characterized by a long, slender nose section, clamshell canopies, a large, sharply swept shoulder-mounted wing, and large rectangular air intakes. For a carrier-based aircraft, the Vigilante was quite large. To facilitate hangar deck storage, the wings, tail, and even the nose could be folded to lower the overall footprint of the aircraft. The flight control system made use of a pitch augmentation system and a yaw damper to improve both supersonic and low-speed handling characteristics. To achieve the desired speed, the Vigilante was fitted with two General Electric J79 axial flow turbojets with 15 to 18,000 pounds of thrust with the afterburners, depending on model. To assist with payload delivery, the Vigilante used an AN/ASB-12 bomb-detecting radar system. This was composed of an internal auto-navigator, a navigational computer, a bombing computer, and a general-purpose radar. In terms of payload, the A-3J could carry a variety of nuclear weapons within an internal, linear bomb bay. Fitted between the engines, the bomb bay was an unconventional cylindrical design that would eject its payload through the tail cone. The payload would generally consist of a warhead mounted to the front of the tandem fuel tanks, all of which would be deployed in a single package. In order to drop its payload, the Vigilante was required to put itself into a vertical attitude over the target before ejecting its payload. After separation, the pilot would take the aircraft inverted before rolling level for max burner egress. Unsurprisingly, this overly complicated system proved to be unreliable. Optionally, the A-3J could be configured as an aerial tanker, replacing the warhead in the bomb bay with a third 290-gallon buddy tank. In addition to the linear bomb bay, the A-3J also had two external hardpoints, which could carry nuclear or conventional bombs. These external stores proved to be a much more reliable method of payload delivery. By November, the second prototype would also join the flight test program. Both aircraft would be flown regularly over the next couple of months, with a total of 40 test flights being completed between the two by May 1959. Overall, aside from problems with the automatic inlet positioning system, the aircraft proved to have promising performance. On multiple occasions, the YA-3J exceeded Mach 2 and had demonstrated its ability to perform full deflection rolls as high as Mach 1.7. It wasn't all smooth sailing, however, as ship number 2 was lost after it crashed due to hydraulic and electrical system failure. Ship number 1 would go on to successfully complete over 300 test flights, logging 500 flight hours before being converted into an RA-5C. By 1960, the Navy gave up on its desire for carrier-based strategic weapons in favor of submarine-based ballistic missiles, leaving the A-3J to fill a role that no longer existed. Due to its remarkable speed and the ability to accurately deliver a payload from its external hardpoints, The Navy opted to repurpose the Vigilante as a high-speed, low-altitude bomber, giving it the new designation A-3J-2. To better serve its purpose in a low-altitude role, the A-3J had an increased fuel load, as well as additional external weapons capabilities. It would also see a change in wing and air intake geometry to better suit the higher density air at low altitudes. Only 18 A-3Js were completed, of which only 6 were actually delivered. The remaining 12 were modified into the new A-3J-3 version and repurposed for reconnaissance missions. It was around this time that the United States Tri-Service Designation System was implemented, with the familiar A-5 designation being introduced. The A-3J-1 was redesignated A-5A, the A-3J-2 became the A-5B, and the A-3J-3 was assigned the designation RA-5C. For simplicity's sake, we'll be using the post-1962 designation from here on out. In service, a total of 10 RA-5C squadrons were formed, 9 of which were assigned to various carriers in the Navy fleet. 8 of those 10 saw extensive service during the Vietnam War. As early as 1964, the Vigilante was put to use carrying out hazardous post-strike reconnaissance missions. Despite its impressive speed, the Vigilante was not immune to aerial defenses. 19 RA-5Cs were lost in combat, primarily to anti-aircraft fire, though 3 were lost to surface-to-air missiles, and 1 was shot down by a MiG-21. Another 9 were lost in operational accidents. Due to these high losses and the strategic value of the aircraft, 36 more RA-5Cs were ordered to be built between 1968 and 1970. Despite its critical role as a reconnaissance aircraft, the Vigilante's days were limited. It was expensive to operate, difficult to maintain, and occupied a significant amount of precious flight deck space. Though built to replace the Douglas A-3 Sky Warrior, the A-3 continued to serve into the early 90s, over a decade after the A-5 was retired. Various fighters, like the RF-8G Crusader, were also repurposed to fill the reconnaissance role. Having proven itself in terms of speed and altitude capability, North American did propose an interceptor variant, Project NR-349. This would replace the linear bomb bay with a third J-79 engine. This proposal was theorized to be capable of Mach 2.5 at altitudes as high as 80,000 feet, while carrying up to 6 AIM-54 Phoenix missiles. Though North American had hoped it would replace the F-102 and F-106, this version of the Vigilante never left the drawing board. The Royal Australian Air Force briefly considered acquiring a fleet of RA-5Cs as its principal bomber, to replace its aging fleet of English electric Canberras. Other aircraft, such as the RF-4C, Dassault Mirage 4, and the BAC TSR-2 were also considered before settling on a tailored General Dynamics F-111C Aardvark. Even ordering the Aardvark, some officials advocated for the purchase of 36 Vigilantes as an interim aircraft, while the F-111C was dealing with protracted development. The government rejected this authority, and no RA-5Cs were delivered. NASA even got their hands on a single A-5A between December 1962 and 1963 for studies relating to the American Supersonic Transport Program. While the SST program was canceled, NASA's Vigilante still gathered valuable data regarding supersonic flight. The Vigilante did leave its mark on history, setting a world altitude record under the condition of carrying a 1,000-kilogram payload to a height of 91,450 feet, a record that would stand for 13 years. Piloted by Commander Leroy Heath and Lieutenant Larry Monroe, the record was accomplished by reaching a speed of Mach 2.1 before pulling up into a ballistic trajectory. At such an altitude, the air pressure was so low that the control surfaces were entirely useless and caused an engine flameout. With no effective aerodynamic controls at such an altitude, Heath and Monroe simply let the aircraft fall to a lower altitude, where in the denser air, they were able to recover and reignite the engines. In the end, the Vigilante was retired in 1979, only 18 years after its introduction. Although not the most famous naval aircraft, the Vigilante was an important milestone, incorporating many advanced features. By the time the F-14 was introduced, with its Tactical Airborne Reconnaissance Pod System, or TARPS, the A-5 was entirely obsolete. TARPS, being a removable camera pod, reduced the need for dedicated recon airframes, saving valuable carrier space for combat-ready aircraft. The A-5 would quickly go from the Navy's primary nuclear bomber to an oversized camera platform, though not without leaving its impact on naval aviation. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any recommendations for certain aircraft or topics you'd like me to cover, feel free to leave a comment below, and I'll add it to an ever-growing list. With that, I'll see you next time.